Not many civilizations are as mysterious as ancient Egypt, a powerful empire that lasted over 3,000 years. It gave us pyramids that still stand and myths that still inspire. It's one of the most explored places on Earth, yet somehow we still find exciting stuff. In Abydos, archaeologists just uncovered a 3,600-year-old royal tomb. It's huge! It has golden hieroglyphs of deities covering the entrance, but the pharaoh's name? It's not there. It's missing. Who was this ruler, and what new chapter could this open in Egypt's story? If there's one place in Egypt where the line between life and demise feels thinner, it's Abydos. To the ancient Egyptians, this was sacred ground. They believed it was the burial place of Osiris, the god who literally passed away, had his remains separated, and came back to life to rule the underworld. Because of that, Abydos became Egypt's spiritual gathering place. Pharaohs built amazing temples here, like the Temple of Seti, famous for its King's List, a wall that has the names of 76 pharaohs carved in it. Pilgrims came from across Egypt, leaving offerings and participating in Osiris festivals, where his demise and rebirth were ritually reenacted. It wasn't just symbolic worship, it was Egypt's version of Comic-Con. But instead of cosplaying superheroes, people reenacted gods coming back to life. Obviously, pharaohs competed to be buried as close to Osiris as possible. Abydos became part cemetery, part holy city, part afterlife insurance policy. Fast forward thousands of years, and we still uncover remarkable stuff around Abydos. That's the case with the recently discovered tomb. In early 2025, a joint team of researchers from the US and Egypt decided to dig beneath a rocky rise ominously called Anubis Mountain. You remember Anubis, the jackal-headed deity who guarded cemeteries. The uncovered royal burial was hidden 23 feet below the surface. Sadly, even though it eluded archaeologists for so long, robbers had already taken away with treasures ages ago. They could definitely tell this was a tomb of someone super important. Similar to how you can walk around a mansion with no furniture but still deduce that someone rich must have lived there. The chamber had mud brick vaults rising over 16 feet. That's taller than a female giraffe standing upright. For something built 36 centuries ago, it still felt enormous. However, when you remember that Egyptians were masters of architecture, nothing seems surprising. So no treasures, no golden mask, and sadly, no name. The cartouche that should have spelled the king's identity was unreadable. Egyptian tombs usually bragged about who was inside. In ancient Egypt, a cartouche was basically a big oval name tag for kings wrapped in hieroglyphs. Think of them as VIP passes that worked in both this life and the next. Without it, your soul couldn't check into the afterlife hotel. That's because to the Egyptians, your name, your ren, wasn't just so your teacher could distinguish you from kids with the same haircut. It was a core part of who you were. As long as your ren survived, so did you. To have your name forgotten was considered a fate worse than passing away. A soul cannot journey without a name. That's why you'd see cartouches all over the place, on temples, obelisks, jewelry, statues, and tomb walls. It wasn't there just for the marketing. It kept the pharaoh's presence front and center everywhere you looked. Imagine building a massive tomb only for 3,600 years later to walk in and go, who is this guy again? Not cool at all. That's why it's fair to imagine our nameless pharaoh haunting the robbers for all eternity. So yeah, cartouche was considered very significant. One of the most famous and mind-blowing examples comes from the tomb of Thutmose III. His burial chamber and sarcophagus were literally shaped like a cartouche. In other words, the entire room was a living architectural symbol of his name. Thankfully, in the recently discovered tomb, not everything was erased. Painted in golden hues at the entrance were two familiar guardians, deities Isis and Nephthys. Isis was the magician who stitched Osiris back together and breathed life into him. Nephthys, her sister, was the eternal mourner and protector of the mummy. Together, they promised that whoever rested here would not face the afterlife alone, and it's one additional proof of the importance of the mysterious pharaoh. So, who could this be? To answer that, we need to go down history lane. This tomb dates back to Egypt's messy chapter called the Second Intermediate Period. Instead of one ruler in charge, the country had many rival kingdoms, each with its own little power base, like a real-life Egyptian version of Game of Thrones. And right in the middle of that chaos was Abydos. For a while, it was home to its own line of kings, the so-called Abydos dynasty. Those weren't the pyramid builders everyone knows, and that's why they're so mysterious. They left behind almost nothing. No great monuments, no sprawling cities, just fragments of names on broken blocks. For centuries, many scholars even doubted they existed at all. That sorta changed in 2014, when archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Senebkay, one of those shadowy kings. Now, everything we know about Senebkay points to him having quite a story to tell. His bones revealed 18 deep wounds, the kind you get in battle. He had blows to his skull, back, and hands, and likely lost his life fighting, making him one of the few pharaohs we know who sadly fell in combat. His tomb was modest, with reused artifacts from earlier kings, but it delivered one priceless thing: proof. Until Senebkay, the Abydos dynasty was just a theory. With him, it became real. And that's why the new discovery could be a big deal. The newly uncovered royal tomb at Abydos shares the same layout and style as Senebkay's. It has limestone chambers, mud brick vaults, and protective deities, although it's much bigger. Which again raises the possibility that we're looking at an even earlier, more powerful ruler of Abydos. Whoever he was, he wanted to be remembered alongside the greats. Which is ironic, because it seems that history tried erasing him. Perhaps additional findings alongside his tomb could tell us more. Yes, there's more, and it's actually pretty cool. Not far from Abydos, in the village of Banawit, archaeologists uncovered a Roman-era pottery workshop. Yeah, you heard that right, a pottery factory close to a pharaoh's burial ground. The site had huge clay kilns, storage rooms, and even broken shards called ostraca. They were basically ancient sticky notes, except instead of shopping lists, those had receipts scratched onto them in Greek and Demotic Egyptian. Little records of everyday transactions, the kind of thing you'd never expect to find near a lost dynasty king. Honestly, the potters missed a chance. Forget boring receipts, they should have been selling Osiris's mugs and Anubis figurines to pilgrims and tourists. But that's not all. It seems that centuries later, during the medieval period, the same ground became a cemetery. Archaeologists found mud brick graves with skeletal remains. This could mean that Abydos kept its aura of significance for hundreds of years after the age of pharaohs. So why this hill again and again? Is this place really a getaway to the afterlife? It is, after all, the very place where Osiris is said to rest. That belief lingered like a shadow for thousands of years, strong enough to pull in pharaohs and later medieval families. Different rituals, same sacred ground. Although, to be fair, the Romans weren't here for Osiris. They came to make pots. The story of Abydos is not over. The excavations will continue, and who knows what else could be discovered in the future. Today, archaeologists are armed with tools that are basically X-ray glasses for the desert. Every scan could reveal a hidden chamber, or if we're lucky, finally give our nameless pharaoh his wren back to him. In fact, I became strangely invested in finding out who he was. So let's hope for some news soon. It's only a matter of time. Do you have your own theories? Let me know. One more step in the wrong direction, and the crossbows will release their arrows. If you open the wrong door, you'll end up in a river of mercury. It's almost impossible to get out of this place, but it is even more difficult to get here. No, this is not a location from an adventure movie, but a treasure hunter. This is a real giant tomb filled with traps and streams of toxic mercury. And it's not somewhere deep in the Amazon jungle or an unknown island. This tomb is located in central China, near the city of Xi'an. And you know what the coolest thing is? This tomb was built more than 2,000 years ago. And even now, in the 21st century, we still don't know how to get there. But let's start from the beginning. Many of you have probably heard of terracotta statues. Thousands of clay sculptures of people. Those statues were first found in 1974, when a group of peasants were digging decks near Xi'an. They found a detailed human-sized figure, and that was 1 out of 1,000. Each figure was made as realistic as possible. Each of them was unique and had its distinctive details. More than 50 years have passed, and scientists are still digging up these sculptures. The number has already exceeded 8,000. But what are they doing there? What is their purpose? Terracotta sculptures are kinda guarding the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. He was such an influential man in China that he wasn't just buried in a tomb. His servants created a giant coffin complex the size of a small town. So, if thousands of clay guards symbolically protect this place, it's difficult to imagine what's in the center of this ancient, gigantic tomb. But first, let's find out who Qin Shi Huang was, and then move on to the dangerous traps. He was the first son of the ruler of the kingdom of Qin. It was one of the 6 kingdoms that existed on the territory of modern China. In 2059 BCE, when Qin Shi Huang was born, those 6 kingdoms were independent and separated from one another. Moreover, there was a strong conflict between them that lasted for more than 200 years. But Qin Shi Huang turned out to be the man who managed to conquer and unite all these kingdoms. He became more than just a king. He became the first emperor of China. But how did he complete a seemingly impossible task? Natural disasters, clever strategy, tactics, and skills helped him to conquer the 6 kingdoms. Scientists are still arguing about some of the details of how this happened. All that can be said is that Qin Shi Huang was a very wise and intelligent emperor. So it's not surprising that his burial turned out to be so huge. He was buried in the largest and most luxurious funeral complex in the history of China. The area the size of a small city contains many underground caves filled with things an emperor could need in the afterlife. In ancient China, as well as in ancient Egypt, people believed that when an emperor went to the other world, he could take with him those things that were buried with him. Unfortunately, sometimes it could be people. But Qin Shi Huang acted wisely and correctly. He decided to bury clay statues. But the coolest thing is that the architects and builders of this complex made it impregnable. The whole area holds many secrets, historical artifacts, and priceless objects. There's a beautiful place with the emperor's body in the center of this tomb. Imagine how many treasures you can find there, and all of them were meant to remain untouched and unseen by other people. And we probably won't be able to get to them, at least in the near future. Ancient Chinese historian Sima Qian wrote something about the tomb about 100 years after the emperor's burial. He said that this place had dangerous traps inside the tomb that would destroy anyone who dared to enter the tomb. The engineers installed crossbows with loaded arrows and also poured a huge amount of mercury, simulating the movement of rivers. Of course, that was 2,000 years ago, and crossbows probably don't work anymore. But what about mercury? This toxic metal has no expiration date. It's shiny and moves quickly in liquid form. It looks beautiful, but don't touch it. Even a small drop of mercury can cause damage to your body. Inhalation of its vapors or ingestion causes damage to nerves, the liver, kidneys, and many other symptoms. And that's just one drop. Imagine how dangerous rivers of this substance can be. Who knows how much mercury was loaded there by the tomb builders? But even if you dodge all the traps and don't end up in the poisonous river, mercury would still be able to harm you. Its vapors can pass through the cracks in the walls. This means that the entire tomb is probably soaked in this substance. And by the way, this is not just a guess. Scientists have measured the mercury level at the excavation site and found that it's much higher than normal. But why mercury? In ancient China, mercury was considered the elixir of youth, the source of immortality. According to the records, Qin Shi Huang often took pills with this element. Perhaps this was the reason that his life ended at the age of 49. In any case, people can damage ancient structures and artifacts during excavations. For example, archaeologists caused great damage to Tutankhamun's tomb during its exploration. You dig around, but then suddenly the entrance collapses and you destroy vases, scrolls, interior decorations, and other stuff. But even if you do everything carefully, the writing and drawings on the walls can be destroyed by sunlight or oxygen. Places where there has been no fresh air and ultraviolet radiation for thousands of years have their own chemical composition that can be damaged by contact with the outside world. In the 1970s, when archaeologists were excavating terracotta sculptures, the paint pigment fell off the statues because of contact with the sun and air. Fortunately, the archaeologists quickly adapted and created a technology that allowed them to get the statues out without damaging the paint. It was a long and careful process, but it was worth it, and here's why. According to ancient writings, the emperor created an underground kingdom with a beautiful palace in the center. He decorated the ceiling of this palace with expensive pearls. You know why? To simulate the stars in the night sky. And that's just the ceiling. It's difficult to imagine how the walls, floor, and tomb of the emperor are decorated. Besides, scientists expect to find many other statues that copy the emperor's servants. So, in simple terms, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is a paradise for archaeologists and historians. But of course, it will take more than one generation before they extract all the treasures. Some experts predict that the excavation of the entire tomb could take centuries. But of course, new archaeological technologies can change everything. For example, non-invasive research methods mean you don't have to enter the tomb. You can see it through a special device. Another idea is the use of muons. Those are subatomic products that appear as a result of the collision of cosmic rays and atoms in the Earth's atmosphere. The point is that these muons can penetrate through solid objects, just like X-rays. Or how about nanotechnologies? Imagine millions of tiny digger robots climbing into a tomb and starting to scan the area. They transmit the data to a computer, and then scientists create a holographic model. It all sounds cool, but to be honest, the charm of archaeology is lost here. It's one thing when you carefully dig up some ancient artifact with your hands, see it with your own eyes, and scrupulously clean it from the ground. And it's completely different when you watch it on a computer screen. But in any case, technologies using muons or some kind of robots ensure people's safety. It's better if a computer falls into a trap than if it happens to an archaeologist. Archaeologists recently found something fascinating from a forgotten Maya kingdom, a tomb hidden in a collapsing pyramid. Inside, there was a king buried for 1,700 years, a jade mask that looks almost human, but not quite. And all this thanks to the looters who missed it by just 6 feet. They stumbled upon it in 2022 in the dense jungles near the border of Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. In Mayan times, this little place used to be called Xochitlam. It's a lost city, half swallowed by jungle. This place meant pretty much nothing compared to other big Mayan cities, like Tikal or Teotihuacan, or so we thought. The team found a tomb of a Mayan ruler. The artifacts, the names of kings, all this revealed that Xochitlam wasn't just some tiny village. It was a pretty important place for that culture. And what they found inside that tomb may rival the treasures of any Maya metropolis. The tomb's ceiling had collapsed long ago, but the offerings were still inside and remained intact even after centuries. They recovered over 16 spondylus shells. These things were used by the ancient elite for power and rituals. That meant that whoever the tomb was related to, it was someone wealthy, of high status, who got themselves a ceremonial burial. Archaeologists also found carved femur bones. They were etched with hieroglyphs and names. Maya literally wrote their history in human remains. Researchers want to dive super deep and get a DNA analysis on the bones. Maybe that will help uncover familial ties, origins, or health problems these people might have faced. And most important of all, the mosaic jade mask. It was pieced together from luminous green tiles into an expression that feels almost human, almost alive. A lot of people were joking that it's just like Jim Carrey's mask in the famous movie. But it wasn't a magical artifact. That was the face of a forgotten Maya king, staring out at us after 1,700 years of silence. His name was etched into the femur bones, Itzam Kokaj Balam. Historians think this might be the ruler who reigned around 350 BCE. Unfortunately, this period is super underdocumented. We barely know anything about those times, but it looks like he was pretty important to the locals. One of the bones even showed a carved figure holding a deity's severed head. The deity's head looks exactly like the jade mask. Perhaps this was supposed to be the king himself, defeating some mythological villain. Other inscriptions mention the king's father and grandfather. That links Xochitl to the mighty Maya capitals we mentioned, Tikal and Teotihuacan. Tikal was once the beating heart of the Maya world. It was a fascinating megapolis. A city rose from the Guatemalan lowlands with towering step pyramids that scraped the sky. That place was home to tens of thousands of people. It was also a hub of art, astronomy, and culture. The rulers were worshipped almost as living deities. Their deeds were carved into stelae that still stand amid the howler monkeys. Teotihuacan was located even further north. Now that was a mystery of another kind. It wasn't really Mayan, but rather Central Mexican. But still, that was a true metropolis, one of the largest cities in the world during its time. It was most famous for its Avenue of the Dead and colossal structures like the Pyramid of the Sun. It was a rich cultural center that had a worldwide influence. For centuries, both Tikal and Teotihuacan seemed to have completely different cultures. Tikal was a flourishing city-state where people loved reading, astronomy, and beautiful architecture. Teotihuacan was a titanic militaristic superpower. Two big centers of Mexico, separated by 600 miles of jungle and mountains. Compared to these imperial capitals, Xochitl was a whisper. But it looked like this Itzam guy from the tomb wasn't just a ruler of a random village. He seemed to have political ties in ancient Mesoamerica. The craziest part is that we almost lost this piece of history, all because of the looters. At some point in the past, grave robbers had tunneled dangerously close. They stopped digging just 6.5 feet away from the tomb. That's just like in that meme with the diamonds. Sometimes you stop digging right before you hit it big. But in our case, thank heavens they didn't get there first. That's how close we came to losing a piece of history. In an almost poetic irony, it was the looters' tunnels themselves that led Estrada Belli's team to the site. Archaeologists have been looking around and using the so-called LiDAR technology. That's basically laser beams shot from high above, which help them map the spot. It's like taking X-rays of the jungle floor. And that's when they found the little signs of intrusion. They quickly realized that if someone was digging here, they were probably looking for something important. Without the failing looters, they might have walked past a discovery. In any case, archaeologists want to keep searching. They might even find more chambers buried inside the abandoned pyramid. We just keep finding mysterious things related to the Maya. Recently, buried deep within the ruins of Tikal, archaeologists found a house, and in that house, a limestone altar. It was covered in vibrant murals of red, yellow, and black. What's weird is that this build wasn't made by Maya. It was unmistakably Teotihuacan in style. And just like the tomb from before, it was made about 1,700 years ago. The altar was discovered inside a Maya-era residence known as Group 6DX7. It stood 3.5 by 6 feet right in the center of the home. That was very typical for Teotihuacan traditions. It bore a mural of the storm god. That was also a central deity in the Teotihuacan pantheon. But this altar depicted no kings and no rulers. That's very weird. As we said, Maya worshipped and honored their dynasties and political power, putting them pretty much everywhere, like some merch. But instead, this altar worshipped the deities alone.
and it did so in the heart of Maya's main capital, Tikal. When archaeologists dived deeper, they saw it as unmistakable proof that Teotihuacanos not only came to Tikal, they thrived there. This house wasn't some trade outpost, people actually lived in it. Teotihuacanos built homes, practiced their rituals, and left their deities behind in this city. And Maya seemed to be chill about that. Researchers think this was a home for some elite people from Teotihuacan, or maybe it belonged to Mayans who practiced Teotihuacano culture and deeply respected it. But it might be something darker than a simple, friendly multiculturalism. The two cities weren't in the best relationship. There was some tension, maybe even surveillance. The house and the altar were probably built around 300 to 400 BCE. That was a period when Tikal was rising in power. This might have caught the attention of the mighty empire to the north. It's almost as if Mayans poked the beast. By 400 to 450 BCE, that attention may have become something sinister. The altar could have actually been the symbol of domination. Had the Maya of Tikal truly welcomed their guests, or did they come here and bluntly started building foreign altars in sacred spaces? Did Teotihuacan use this as some kind of soft invasion? In that case, it would make sense for Mayans to destroy that place or vandalize it somehow. Mayans regularly buried their buildings and rebuilt on top of them. But for some reason, this altar remained untouched. Mayans found it and buried it with the surrounding buildings as they were. No vandalism, no destruction, no rebuilding even. Looks like they had some complicated feelings about Teotihuacans. It was a time when cultures clashed, fused, overlapped, and possibly spied on each other. Perhaps one day we'll learn more about what really happened among these ancient civilizations.
Let's face it, most ancient tombs have been looted at least once. No matter how scary the rumors could have been, most mummies were open to. But one. This is the Bashiri mummy, and it puzzles everyone so much that nobody dares to see what's inside. Meet Howard, but you must know him already if you're into Egyptian history. He's primarily famous for discovering King Tut's tomb back in 1922. But few people know that before this revolutionary discovery, he had probably found another mummy. It happened in 1919, and it goes by several names, either the Bashiri mummy or the mummy of Pacheri, or the untouchable one. Some reports say that Howard stumbled upon the Bashiri mummy in Luxor's Valley of the Kings, just where he would later find Tut's tomb. Despite this find, not much is known about this particular mummy. The reason why it's still unharmed in any way is not because of some superstitions, but because nobody is sure that they can undo what they do if something goes wrong. The mummy is so intricately wrapped that researchers never unfurled it for fear of irreversible damage. The golden rule of anyone who works with antiquities: if you're not sure you can't make it better or preserve it unchanged, do not touch it. History knows many examples of ancient relics ruined beyond repair, say Ecce Homo, or smiling statue restoration. The delicate fabric that covers the mummy's face has this cool design that kind of looks like a pyramid. The researchers are not 100% sure, but this might be the only one of its kind with that embalming style. But without knowing the ancient technique, it's next to impossible not to ruin the mummy while unwrapping and wrapping it back. Back in the day, people, both experts and looters, would unwrap mummies for all sorts of reasons, mostly to study them. Luckily, these days, we have advanced tech that lets us check out what's inside a sarcophagus without having to unwrap anything. After taking a closer look at the Bashiri mummy, researchers figured out that it belonged to a man who was around 5.5 feet tall and lived during the Ptolemaic era, which makes this mummy roughly 2,300 years old. The Egypt Museum shared that the X-ray scan also uncovered an inscription of the guy's name, but it's a bit tricky to tell if it says Pacheri or Nenu, adding to the intrigue. The museum also pointed out that the fancy casing the mummy is in features all sorts of decorated scenes. You can see the mummy lying on a bed, flanked by deities Isis and Nephthys, along with the four sons of Horus. Plus, there are 2 images of the funerary god Anubis at the feet of the casing. By the way, Bashiri mummy is not the only one that has remained untouched. This is Hatshepsut, and Gaston Maspero, a French archaeologist, made the decision to leave her mummy untouched, wanting to keep her resting peacefully since she was in such amazing shape. He did mention, though, that her tomb had been raided long ago. Thanks to some X-ray work, we learned more about the mummy. The scans revealed a few artifacts still wrapped up with the wife of a high priest, including amulets around her neck, right arm, and forehead. The X-rays also showed she had some dental issues and arthritis in her knees. While she passed away as an older woman, it's tough to pinpoint her exact age. However, various sources from her son's reign indicate that she was held in high regard in the kingdom. Hatshepsut served as the sister wife of Penejam II. You got me right, they were related by blood and were siblings, but back then it was pretty common to get married this way to preserve the purity of the bloodline. Say that to Habsburg, duh. Their chase for purity only led to inbreeding and the notorious Habsburg's jaw. Right, I guess we should not judge ancient Egyptian rules and morals, but what we can say for sure is that both Bashiri and Hatshepsut were incredibly lucky to stay untouched. The odds were not in King Tut's favor, though. The researchers' work hit him hard. The tomb itself was discovered in 1922, but it wasn't until 1925 that the nested coffins were opened during an excavation. The outer coffin, held together with silver pins, opened up to show another coffin shaped like a mummy, decorated with colorful glass and flower garlands. There were worries about the king's mummy because it had been exposed to moisture. The middle coffin was pretty heavy and didn't have any handles, so they had to be super careful taking it out. Inside the innermost coffin, which was solid gold and wrapped in a red cloth, they found the royal mummy, and this all went down on October 28, 1925. Tutankhamun's mummy, measuring about 6.07 feet, fit snugly into the innermost coffin, which was 6.17 feet long. You can already tell there was a problem, right? Imagine how hard it is to extract something as fragile as an ancient dried-up mummy, especially when there's not much room for maneuver. Plus, the mummy looked sus. It was pitch black. Howard Carter, the lead archaeologist of the expedition, estimated that around 2 buckets worth of oils had been poured over the mummy. But care had been taken to avoid the mask and feet. It was made to preserve him better. The body was positioned at a slight angle in the coffin, and there was a noticeable difference in the amount of dark oils on the right and left sides, indicating that the coffin might have tilted while being lowered into the sarcophagus. This oil created moisture inside the coffins, and over time, it reacted chemically, which Carter described as a sort of slow, spontaneous combustion, leading to the carbonization of the linen wrappings. Unfortunately, the combination of heat and moisture took a toll on the mummy's trappings as well. The crooked flail fell apart, the resin scarab cracked, and the threads holding the hands and mummy's bands started to decay, making everything quite fragile. Plus, the oils hardened over the years, effectively gluing the mummy and mask to the coffin's bottom. To try and separate the mummy from the inner and middle coffins, they were placed in the sun for several hours, reaching temperatures of 149 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite this effort, the mummy remained stuck, so the initial examination had to be done right where it was. The first part of Tutankhamun's mummy the researchers checked out was his lower legs and feet, meaning they started the examination from the bottom up. As they peeled back the bandages, they uncovered the first of many treasures wrapped up with the king. They took their time to carefully document and photograph everything they found. The inner layers of bandages were in pretty bad shape, mostly turning to dust, making it tough to figure out how everything was originally wrapped. Still, the overall methods matched what was seen in other nobles' mummies from that time. Lots of folded linen pads were used to shape the torso and thighs. The outer and inner bandages were made from fine linen, while the middle layers were coarser. They had some intricate bandaging around the shoulders and chest with a similar style around the groin. Each limb, along with fingers and toes, which were fitted with gold caps, was wrapped separately. Tutankhamun even wore gold foil sandals on his feet. They hoped to separate the mummy from the coffin by removing the outer bandages, but the resins had stuck the body to the coffin. So, the researchers ended up chiseling it out. To do this, they had to cut the torso in half at the hips and disarticulate the arms to continue unwrapping. Each part was treated with hot paraffin wax for stability, and later the hands and feet were reattached with resin. Finally, they used hot knives to detach the head from the mask. To check the teeth, it was decided to make an incision around the jaw and neck, which was later fixed with resin. So technically, the scientists did all they could to preserve the mummy, but still, in a way, it ended up being damaged beyond repair. What do you think? Should they have left it in the coffin? Or did they do the right thing? Let us know in the comments.
Egyptian archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery near Cairo just recently. Drumroll, please. The most ancient and most complete mummy yet discovered in the country. Yes, they were keeping it under wraps. The 4,300-year-old mummy was found in a group of tombs close to the step pyramid of Djoser, dating back to the Egyptian Old Kingdom. It was covered in layers of gold. The team also found several other tombs, including one belonging to an ancient Egyptian official and another belonging to a secret keeper who had the power to perform special ceremonies. Another interesting tomb was that of a writer, which featured the largest statues ever found in the area. This vast burial site is also home to more than a dozen pyramids and resting grounds. Probably one of the most famous mummies in the world is that of Hatshepsut. She ruled Egypt like a boss for around 20 years, building all sorts of impressive buildings and creating new trade routes. But when archaeologist Howard Carter found her tomb in the Valley of the Kings, her sarcophagus was empty. However, Carter did find two coffins in another tomb, one of which belonged to Hatshepsut's wet nurse and the other to an unknown woman. In 2006, a team of specialists decided to investigate whether that mysterious lady was the queen herself. They found a molar tooth in a wooden box with Hatshepsut's name on it, and when they compared it to a gap in the mummy's mouth, it was a perfect match. Ramses II was a pretty impressive ruler, but it was his mummy that eventually made history. Now, we don't hear too much about his daddy. Okay, I'll stop. Ramses is considered to be the most powerful pharaoh in all of Egypt, as he reigned for a whopping 6 decades. He also lived to be over 90 years old. Now that's pretty amazing, considering the time he lived in. Ramses II supposedly had over 100 offspring too. Talk about a big family. When he passed away, his body was originally buried in the Valley of the Kings, but some sneaky guys tried to rob his tomb of all his treasures. Officials back in the day weren't having any of that though, so they moved his body to a secret location to keep it safe. Fast forward to the 1800s, and Ramses II's mummy was discovered along with a bunch of other rulers and important officials. But it wasn't in the best condition, so archaeologists flew it to Paris to get it, pampered. Problem was, he couldn't just be transported into another country. The only solution available was to give Ramses II his own passport. His occupation was listed as king, and the document even featured his photo. Most mummies aren't necessarily known for having the most hydrated skin. But that of an ancient woman, also known as Lady Di, proves otherwise. No, not that Lady Di. This wealthy lady from ancient times was discovered in an ornate tomb in 1971, and she looked fabulous, if we can say so about a mummy. Thanks to the special conditions in her tomb, like the moisture in the environment and the lack of oxygen, her body was almost perfectly preserved. Her skin was soft, her hair was on point, and she was still flexible. The museum that now proudly displays her mummy also shows a ton of fancy items that were buried with her, like dinnerware and musical instruments. Archaeologists investigated the mummy further and discovered that she passed away from a heart attack at around 50 years old. Even though it hasn't been around for over 2,000 years, Lady Di is still making history. The mummy of Oetzi the Iceman was discovered in the Alps in 1991. Austrian authorities initially thought he was a modern mountaineer because he was so well preserved. Turns out, he was actually from the Copper Age. He was found in a mountain pass over 10,000 feet above sea level. Through studying his mummy, we've learned so much about life in Copper Age Europe. For example, we know that he was a native of Central Europe and enjoyed eating meat. He also suffered from arthritis, narrowing arteries, and intestinal problems. But he likely used acupuncture and medicinal herbs to treat these conditions. And apparently, he was pretty handy with tools. He sharpened them just days before his untimely demise. Who knows if he was expecting trouble or just getting ready for some routine work. Now, King Tut and his story is most likely the one that made all mummies famous. This pharaoh passed away at the young age of 19, more than 3,000 years ago. But his mummy is still one of the most well-known in the world. When his tomb was opened in 1922, people went wild because it was still intact, unlike many other royal tombs. It had some seriously blinged-out coffins, including one made of solid gold. Not only did Tut's tomb give us a glimpse into ancient Egyptian history, but his mummy also taught us a lot about the time he lived in. DNA analysis helped identify his parents and revealed that the pharaoh had a rare bone disorder that might have made walking a bit tough. Now, Ginger is most likely one of the coolest mummies you'll ever hear about. He's like a time traveler from 5,000 years ago who's still looking fly with his golden hair and perfectly preserved nails. Ginger was discovered in Egypt and is believed to be the earliest known mummified body. Before people even knew about mummification, they used to place bodies in shallow graves in the hot, dry sand. And since the sand absorbed all the water, bacteria couldn't reproduce and the body was preserved naturally. Now, scientists are not sure if Ginger's preservation was intentional or not, but since he was buried with some pottery vessels, it's likely that whoever buried him knew some serious preservation techniques. If you want to meet Ginger in person, he's currently chilling at the British Museum. One Dutch art collector bought a statue from Asia and ended up finding a weird discovery. The statue contained a mummy hidden inside. Unfortunately, the body was too fragile to move, so they had to leave it there. The coolest part is that this mummy is over 1,000 years old and was on display for 200 years before being encased in the statue. When scientists did a CT scan, they found out that the mummy was filled with paper scraps covered in writings. Experts think he might have done this thing called self-mummification, which is a pretty intense process involving a special diet and tea that makes your body less prone to bacteria. Only a few people could handle this ritual, and those who managed to do that were seriously respected. No other Egyptian queen has baffled scientists and historians like the stunning Nefertiti. Based on her statues, she was known for her slender neck, wide eyes, and high cheekbones. Her name translates to "the beautiful woman has come." Talk about living up to your name, huh? Even though she wasn't a pharaoh herself, Nefertiti still managed to leave a lasting impression. Written records suggest that, as a wife and queen, she held an incredibly influential role. Because of her power, she was indeed admired, but she also managed to make quite a lot of enemies throughout her life. She was also related to King Tut, but not biologically. Rather, she was his stepmother. So far, locals have yet to identify her mummy, but that may soon change. A local Egyptologist who has been busy excavating tombs in the Valley of the Kings has found two mummies that he believes could be Nefertiti and her daughter. According to specialists, we may soon finally get a definitive answer about the identity of these two mummies. And if one of them does turn out to be Nefertiti, we could be in for a real treat. DNA analysis and CT scans of the mummy could give us the most complete and accurate image of the queen that we've ever seen. It's crazy to think that we've only scratched the surface of what lies beneath modern-day Egypt. Nefertiti ruled during a time of great power and prosperity in Egypt, but unfortunately passed away in a period of social turmoil, leading to her gravesite being lost. Now, where's my mummy?